Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer. Say, how many paranoids does it take to change a light bulb? Who wants to know? Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at my top 10 two-player games of all time. We'll get back to the review in just a moment. I want to take a minute to ask you to check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about history, books on history, military history. I even post some of my lectures for my classes on there. Please check that out. Please subscribe to that channel. And now, back to the review. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and take a look at my top 10 two-player games of all time. I was looking back, and it's been nearly 4 years since I looked at my favorite two-player games, and this list has changed quite a bit since that earlier list. Yeah, I did the list, I think, shortly before I left Texas. That would have been the spring of 2020, right after I graduated. So essentially, every game on that top 10 list could be considered an honorable mention. I have a few more really quickly. I'm going to mention these. Again, honorable mentions, favorite two-player games. Star Trek Away Missions, great game from Gale Force 9. You are Federation, Borg, Klingon, Romulans fighting for tech during the Battle of Wolf 359 or just thereafter. Verdun, 1916, Steel Inferno, a great World War I game about the Battle of Verdun. Really a lot of fun. Watergate, a great card game obviously with a board there too, but it really feels like a CDG. About the Watergate scandal. One of you is the Nixon administration, one of you is the press, and you're trying to either cover up this scandal or uncover the scandal. The British Way, which is the first and today only coin game I have played, a two-player coin game, which has 4 different games within it. Very fun from GMT. It's about the insurrections, decolonization of the British Empire after the war. General Orders World War II, which is a very fun worker placement World War II game from Osprey Games. David Thompson, Trevor Benjamin designed it. Another great game in their collaboration. Napoleon 1806 from Shakos. This is a great block game where you are as fog of war, and you are attempting to either, the French are attempting to march and take towns in Prussia. The Prussians are attempting to prevent that. It's got a great card play system and core tracking system I really like quite a bit. Shores of Tripoli from Fort Circle Games. This is a great game about the Barbary pirates and the wars and the Americans that went in there to kind of clean all that mess up. Really, really a fun game that, again, kind of plays almost like a CDG. Really a lot of fun. Shores of Tripoli. Okay, let's go ahead and get into this list now. Number 10, I think this one was on the list 4 years ago. This is Commands and Colors Napoleonics. This is a game, it's a Commands and Colors games, meaning you've got the center, the right flank, and the left flank, and you're activating your units to advance. You've got several different scenarios in the core set. I know there's a lot of expansions. I haven't played any of the expansions, but in the core set, you are, of course, you're advancing with your units, you're rolling die, you're trying to take your objectives. It's a fun system. You've seen it before, Memoir 44, Battle Cry, etc., etc. But Commands and Colors Napoleonics has kind of always been my favorite in those series of games. Any one of those games could potentially be on this list, but CNC Napoleonics is my favorite of that bunch. So that's Commands and Colors Napoleonics. That is my number 10, and that is from GMT Games. My number 9 is a game from Worthington, and this is, unlike so many deck building games, this is actually a deck destruction game. This is Struggle for Europe, 1939 to 1945, Worthington Games. And in this game, you essentially have a map of Europe. One of you is the Axis player, one of you is the Allies. You have units that have basic numbers, and you have decks of cards. And as you're playing through the decks of cards, in order to essentially activate those cards, you have to destroy another card. So you have to make choices about which cards you're going to get rid of. And it is tense, it's fun, it's kind of based on the same system that we saw from Lincoln, but it was an awesome game, and it was a deck destruction game, and then this one builds on that, it runs with it, and it's really, you don't expect it, the board looks pretty simple, you don't expect it to be as strategic as it is, but it is a great game. I've won this game, I've lost this game, and the both sides played very differently. Of course, the Axis start out much stronger; they get weaker as the game goes on. The Allies start out weak; they get stronger as the game goes on. And there's different ways you can win. You can win by conquering Russia. You can win just by outlasting your enemy. It's really, really, really fun. I really enjoy Struggle for Europe, 1939, 1945. That is from Worthington, and that is my number 9. My number 8 is another game from Fort Circle Games, and this is a game that there was a lot of buzz about this game, and I was really excited to get it to the table. I was scared it would not live up to the hype. It totally does. This is Votes for Women. This is a great game about the suffrage movement, and I really like too how the game does a good job of really explaining the history. And now, any good historical game, usually war games, but not always, can do that. They can explain the history, but still provide some really good gameplay here. And you realize that the women's suffrage movement was not just this kind of women against men movement. It wasn't anything nearly as simple as that. There were many people within the women's suffrage movement. It was quite a diverse movement in and of itself, and oftentimes a contradictory movement. But the game is a board of the United States, and essentially in each state you're trying to spread influence. And then there's a point where you're trying to get the government to pass or put the 19th Amendment out for ratification. And you get that to happen. You get the 19th Amendment out for ratification, and then you can start, like, if the states already have enough influence, boom, they already vote for or against it. And then you've kind of got these roll-offs, and you can kind of spend tokens in order to re-rolls, but you're trying to battle for each of the states. I thought it was very fun, very clever, very inventive. Shades of Twilight Struggle, but also very much its own game. So this is Votes for Women. That is number 8, and that is from Fort Circle Games. My number 7 is a war game that is set during the First World War, and it's probably my favorite First World War game. In fact, it is my favorite First World War game. But it is a game that covers kind of the breadth of the war. It's a deep strategic game, and yet it's not that long, and it's got some fairly simple, streamlined rules. I played this a few times. I've only ever played this with Zach, and he's mad because I always win. But we switched sides, and I still win, so he's not too happy. But in fairness to him, both times I've won by the skin of my teeth. So this is an Attrition of Souls from Compass Games. This is a great World War I game. Like I say, it's a grand strategic game. You got the map of Europe. You can kind of bring in other belligerents, the USA and Bulgaria and Romania and Greece as the game advances. You're fighting in different theaters. You've the way the units have kind of their combat values printed on them, which is pretty cool. Like the actual pictures of the die and what you got to roll. It's just a fantastic game. I remember this came out at the same time as Lamps of Europe. I think Lamps of Europe maybe a little sooner. And everybody went on and on about Lamps of Europe. And I actually bought Attrition of Souls and Lamps of Europe at the same time. Fell in love with Attrition of Souls. I got rid of Lamps of Europe because it just didn't do a thing for me. So this is an Attrition of Souls. This is my number 7. This is from Compass Games. My number 6 is a game that just came out last year. I actually bought it right after it came out, and Kim and I went to Hawaii. I took it with us. We played it kind of when we had some off time. We play it before bed and stuff like that. But this is Star Wars: The Deck Building Game. Star Wars: The Deck Building Game is one of those games that when they announced it, I'm like, is it going to be good? Oh, it's probably just going to be something they published to keep a hold of the IP. I don't know. But they printed it, and I was amazed at how much fun Star Wars: The Deck Building Game is. And Kim and I have played this a ton. One of my most played games of 2023. Played it with some other people as well. But I love the fact that you've got the lineup there, and you can actually attack cards in the lineup to deny them to the opponent, but then you also get some rewards here. It's great. There's some notable characters missing: Yoda, Ben Kenobi, Palpatine. So I'm hoping they're going to do an expansion. But I know they're doing the new trading card Star Wars game, so I don't know how realistic this is. But please, 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 we need some more of the Star Wars deck building game. It is so freaking good. This is number 6, the Star Wars deck building game, and this is from Fantasy Flight Games. But number 5 is a game that I bought maybe 2012 or thereabouts. Before I was a game reviewer, I bought this game. I think actually I was writing for the newspaper. I was doing some reviews for the newspaper because I think I wrote something about this in the newspaper. But this is another IP science fiction game that just I actually hadn't played it in a while, and then Kim and I played it recently. This is Star Trek Fleet Captains. Star Trek Fleet Captains. It wasn't on my list 4 years ago because I hadn't played it in a while, but I played it since. I remember, oh my gosh, I love this game. In the base game, it's the Federation versus the Klingons, but there are Romulan and Dominion expansions. But they're on the hero click system. Essentially, you've got the dials that show weapons, engines, shields, the different stats you have, and then depending on your hit points and stuff, it affects what dial points you can go to. But this really feels like Star Trek in a box. You're exploring strange new worlds. You're uncovering tiles in space. You're sending away teams down to conduct surveys. You are establishing outposts that later can become star bases. And then, of course, you're battling your enemies. It's really a lot of fun. They got this great card encounter system. I just really, really, really enjoy it. And it's got great models. This game, I was really surprised when I got it, just how many cool Starship models you get with this game. But this is number 5. This is Fleet Captains, and that is from WizKids. My number 4 is another game that I just got last year. It is a campaign game, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through. Kim and I have been playing it. We're about 2/3 of the way through of this, and this is Undaunted Stalingrad. Now, in my last list, I had Undaunted Normandy on there, and I think I'd played North Africa by that point, but I put Undaunted Normandy on there. But I'm putting Stalingrad here because I think Stalingrad is the better two-player game. In fact, I like Normandy, but I've got the reinforcements pack, and I would much rather play Undaunted Normandy as a four-player game. To me, it shines as a four-player. Now, it's good as a two-player. It shines as a four-player. But Undaunted Stalingrad is a two-player game. You're the Germans, you're the Russians, you're fighting in Stalingrad, and it is a campaign. And it has been so much fun to see this campaign evolve and to see the choices and the changes. And oh man, it's so good. And then you get reinforcements, and they're not, the replacements, and they're damaged in certain ways. And then you can upgrade some cards. It makes them more powerful. I really hate the Soviet snipers in that game with a passion. I love Undaunted Stalingrad. It is a tremendous game. It's a great campaign. I don't know. Part of the charm of the game is the campaign. Part of me kind of wishes there was just some independent solo games you could play, but I get it. It's an ingenious campaign game. It really is ingenious, and I do love this game quite a bit. So that is Undaunted Stalingrad, of course, a Trevor Benjamin and David Thompson design. That is from Osprey Games, and that is my number 4. Now, my number 3 is a game that plays up to 4 players. You can play 1 to 4 players. I played it at every player count. By far and away, it is the best as a 2-player game. I wouldn't say I would never play it again at a 4-player. I'd be very reluctant to play it again at a 3-player just because it becomes a 2-on-1. And I'd play it again solo, but there's other solo games I'd rather play. As a 2-player, it is spectacular. This is Space Empires 4X. I actually, this was one of the first games. This is the first review copy game I think GMT ever sent to me. I actually got a copy for Zach for his birthday a few years ago, and he absolutely loves it. But it's a war game. Now it is a civilization building game. There are civilization building aspects to the game. There's tech upgrades, and you're colonizing worlds, and you're getting resources. It's a 4X game, obviously, but at its heart, it feels like a war game. And you've got all these ships, but you can build decoy ships that are flying around, so your enemy kind of doesn't know, do I have to defend against that, or am I just being played there? Space Empires is spectacular. It's just spectacular. And I really, really enjoyed this one too. I think this one was on my list 4 years ago, and this, I think, will probably be on my 2-player list until the day I die. It is freaking awesome. So that is Space Empires 4X. That is number 3. That is from GMT Games. My number 2 was my number 2 on the last list. It's also a GMT game. No surprises if you know the show. This is Twilight Struggle. Twilight Struggle is a great game about the Cold War. One of you is the United States. One of you is the Soviet Union. And you are attempting to essentially win the Cold War without it devolving into a nuclear holocaust. And it is just so good. And I've said this 100 times. Why this game is so good is I have never played another game that forces you to make the best of bad decisions so consistently and painfully as this game does. You are constantly trying to make the right decisions here. And they recently came out with the Horn of Africa version, which is just like 2 rounds with where if you just want a taste of this game, you just want a brief engagement with this game, it's a great choice for you. But if you like the meat and potatoes of the full game, this one is awesome. There's some other games that are kind of in the series. 1989, Birth of Freedom is great. 1960, Making of a President is great. But the original Twilight Struggle, Le Mon Juste, it is so good. It's so much fun. It's one of those games, though, if you're playing with somebody who's played the game a lot and who knows the cards, it's kind of hard to win. It's really a game that is best played with someone that's learning the game with you. That being said, even if you have to play against an experienced player, take the time to learn it, play it. It is so good. It is so much fun. You can also, there's the app version. I haven't played that, but I have friends who had. You can learn it by playing the app. If you have to do that, do that. But you want to play Twilight Struggle. Um, Truly one of the greatest two-player games ever made. For years, it was #1 on Board Game Geek, and there's a reason, because it's just amazing. Wonderful game, Twilight Struggle. That is my #2. That is from GMT. Well, my #1, you probably know. This was my #1 last time in my last list. An IP game that just feels like you're living in that world. This is Star Wars Rebellion from Fantasy Flight Games. Star Wars Rebellion is Star Wars in a box. The way Fleet Captain is Star Trek in a box, Rebellion is Star Wars in a box. You feel like you're playing out the original trilogy, but it goes in all sorts of weird and wonky directions, right? Leia can turn to the dark side. Lando Calrissian can become a Jedi. There's all sorts of fun twists that can happen there. But fundamentally, it captures the essence, the spirit of the original films. It's an asymmetrical game. The Imperial player, of course, has most of the worlds, has a lot of Imperial power, has a lot of starships and weapons, but it doesn't know. I think there's 32 worlds. It doesn't know where the Rebel base is, and so they've got to spend a lot of time and a lot of resources hunting down the Rebel base. Meanwhile, the Rebels have the opposite problem. They know where everything is. They know what targets they want to take down, but they don't have a lot of power. They don't have a lot of military power, so they have to rely on guile and covert ops. But the heart of the game is missions. You're sending out characters on missions. These characters can activate fleets to move fleets from one system to another, or they can, carry out sabotage missions, or they can carry out Imperial projects to build, superstar destroyers or the Death Star, or you can do all sorts of other funky, kooky uh, uh, actions in this game, adventures in this game. And essentially, the rebels are trying to boost their reputation track by winning these victories to get to the point where the reputation is such that the rest of the galaxy kind of rises up against the Empire. And you're also depending on the systems you get, you're building ships, you're building weapons. It's a really, really fun and interesting and engaging Star Wars game. I love Star Wars Rebellion. And I will say this, the only major caveat I have is the combat in the base game is subpar. It's not that interesting. It's not that exciting. They fixed that with the expansion. If you buy the expansion, you can add the combat into that. Now, the expansion is based on Rogue One. And if you don't like the other Rogue One elements, you don't have to play with them. You can just take the combat. I personally like all the Rogue One stuff. I think they did a really good job with it. But regardless, Star Wars Rebellion is phenomenal. If you like Star Wars and you like to play board games and you like two-player games, play this. One final caveat, it does say it plays 2 to 4 players. Ignore the 4 players. It's a 2-player game. The 4-player system feels entirely tacked on. It feels like they put it on there just to say, hey, you can play with more people. But the way they have set it up to play 4 players, I played it 4 players. I don't like it. It's not fun. If somebody came and said, hey, want to play a 4-player game of Rebellion? I'd say, nah, no, thank you. But if somebody asked me to play a 2-player game, it's like, when do you need me and what do I wear? Great game. That is Star Wars Rebellion. That is from Fantasy Flight Games, and that is my #1 2-player game of all time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us here on The Discriminating Gamer. What are your favorite 2-player games? I'm very eager to know, to hear what you think, and let me know what you think of my list. Do you like the games I got on my list? Do you maybe think they're subpar? I'm always very interested to know what you think of what I have to say, so please, please, please let me know. You can leave a comment here on YouTube, Facebook, Board Game Geek, Twitter. Also, too, Please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, etc., 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 all that good stuff. I'd ask you to check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about military history and books on history, fun things like that. I even post some of my lectures from my classes on that channel. It would mean the world to me if you would subscribe to that channel as well. Now, also, too, I'll probably post this video on Board Game Geek. Please go ahead and thumb that. I would appreciate it. And if you really do like the channel, you like the kind of stuff we bring to you here, I would humbly, humbly ask you to please click on the Super Thanks button and leave a tip. You know, ladies and gentlemen, we all know about Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. But how many of you know about Cole's Law? It's thinly sliced cabbage.
Please somebody help me on my feet again. And I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I've been dying. Once a year I wind up in the band. God knows that I love to fight, but I don't ever win. It's a fine line to damnation, but God let me in.
Orlando escapes. Ha ha!
You know, that sounds like an expanded universe novel.
Orlando escapes.
Orlando escapes.